All right, mic check 1 2 1 2. KB on the mic here. Welcome everyone to the Saver Brain headquarters. I am your host, Kelsey Boyer, and it has been a long time coming to sit back in the studio here. Winter was a bit hectic, traveling a lot, so I didn't have much time to have these incredible conversations. But I just wanted to thank everyone who has tuned in to the episodes that we released in Brain Injury Awareness Month. This is definitely just the beginning, so we appreciate everybody who has listened and learned and keeps coming back for more. Like, subscribe, share with your friends, because this is just the start of the Saver Brain headquarters. So today, we have a very special guest who has a long list of post-doctoral accreditations and is the founder of Physio Yoga and Wellness located in Denver, Colorado. She is a skilled physical therapist specializing in concussion management and vestibular rehabilitation. Her interest in this specialty began shortly after earning her doctorate from University of Florida in 2009 and has since seen the life-changing impact of effective vestibular care. She is dedicated to providing evidence-based, patient-centered treatment to improve the quality of life and restore confidence in movement. So let's give a warm welcome, round of applause to Dr. Jessica Klain. We're going to hit her with a round of applause because now I know how to do this. Round of applause to her and me for finally figuring out that button. Okay, perfect. We are in the studio. I filmed the intro before because I get so nervous doing the intro in front of the people because I've botched so many things. But I do.
No need to be nervous with me.
Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, I gave everybody a brief intro on you. What I would love to start with welcoming you into the booth is taking us down a little bit of your journey. You have a list of accreditations was so long, and I was just like, wow, she has been working on this her entire life, and I wanted to hear from you, like, why you have been down the path that you have gone down.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, if we're going to really bring it back, the whole reason I became a physical therapist is because when I was 16, I tore my ACL, right? Very typical, playing soccer, I was in physical therapy for a long time. And I was like, how fun is this? You get to hang out with people, talk about fun things, and get them better, right? So fast forward, go to PT school, start working in my job. And then it's all great and you're helping people. And then you realize that there are these niches of really interesting things that are happening that people are seeking care for that maybe aren't finding the help that they need. And so one of the main ways that I got involved in concussion and vestibular is that I took a really specific interest in headaches, specifically upper cervical headaches. So I was seeing a lot of people that were having headaches and neck pain after car accidents, and they kept presenting with the same kind of weird headache pattern. Well, that weird headache pattern turns out to be a concussion. And at the time, nobody was diagnosing them with a concussion. So their primary care wasn't, the urgent care or the emergency room wasn't, maybe even their neurologist hadn't. And so I kept seeing these patterns, kind of figured out it was concussion, and went down this road of further concussion education. And with that became vestibular education as well, because they go hand in hand. They're not similar, but they are very intertwined. So I spent several years down that road of becoming concussion certified, vestibular certified, and it opened up this whole new world of treatment and understanding. And really one of the big differences is understanding how the brain is healing and not necessarily pushing through it. Because so many other things in the injury world is to just push through.
Yeah.
And concussion doesn't do well with that. So I went down that road, and then I was like, I feel like I'm still missing some. So I went and did some nutrition training. I did some yoga training, did some run training, and really bringing that all in, because most of us that sustain a concussion want to get back to an active lifestyle. So it's not just about, can I drive? Can I go back to work? Which, sidebar, that's all the insurance cares about. But we as humans care about so much more than that. And that's where a lot of those letters after my name came, is all these Like there's more, and there's more ways to help people is really, really the bottom line.
Yeah. No, it's so badass. I was doing research and yeah, I just was like, "Wow, like you are not messing around." And it's really cool to hear why you did what you did because I think sometimes I want to hear about why the doctors got into the field that they're in and hear if they have a personal connection with this or why does this interest them versus just being like, "I'm a doctor." Like you're like, no,
Right.
like, get to know your doctor. Like, why are they doing what they're doing? So yeah, your list, I was just like, she's badass. And this is like a full circle of just, yeah, getting people back to what they love, which is really cool. And especially in concussion and vestibular. As I was listening to you talk, I was just sitting here being like, wow, I'm so excited to like have you here and learn from you because the way you explain stuff is so digestible. And one thing that stuck out to me was why is it important to know what a concussion is? And why should you get help sooner rather than later? Is something that, you dove into when we had a talk. And I just was like, yeah, people need to know this. Like, why is it important? Everybody knows what a concussion is, but why? And
Mhm.
why not wait?
Right, right. So, man, that I could say so much about that, but I'm going to try to be as concise as possible. So, I think one of the big turning points in concussion management was actually Will Smith's movie Concussion, right? Like it was presented in a Hollywood movement movie that was meant to entertain, which means that it more of the masses are exposed to the message, right? And sure it's a Hollywood movie, but the reality is it was based on a true story where concussions are more prevalent than we think, and concussions can have more detrimental effects than we ever knew. And that allowed the general population to say concussions. If my brother's playing football, if my son's playing football, are they getting concussions? And then it's not just football, it's soccer and field hockey and lacrosse and car accidents and slipping and falling on the ice. And the reality is that almost all of us are going to likely sustain a concussion of some sort in our lives. And a lot of times it can't be avoidable. Like, yes, there are higher risk activities like, taking jumps, snowboarding, and skiing. But also, most of us ride in a car or some sort of public transportation most days of the week, and we are susceptible to getting into a car accident and sustaining a concussion. So I'm going to give kind of some conflicting information in the sense of the majority of people, the statistic is 80% of adults are going to recover from a concussion within 7 to 14 days. But 20% of people don't. And that is a pretty big statistic. And there's still a lot of like old data that's out there related to concussion. This idea of you should cocoon in a dark room because you should eliminate all sensory information. That is one of the worst things that you could do. The other conflicting information out there is that you should not let somebody who sustained a concussion go to sleep. Again, totally false, right? If our brain is injured, you need to sleep. That's what's going to help it heal. Now, there are red flag symptoms that people should go to the emergency room for. And those are the pretty obvious, like massive headache, they're vomiting, they've lost consciousness for several minutes. Let them go to the ER, let them get checked out. But in general, you don't have to go to the ER. You don't want to cocoon. You don't want to stay awake forever. And this basic information gets you through the first couple of days. Ideally, you start to feel better. But if you don't feel better, really the key is getting in to see somebody with some concussion experience within the first 7 days. That 7 days is really that marker we found in research that if you see somebody in those first 7 days, you understand what's going on and you have a plan to really promote healing, your overall healing timeline is going to be substantially shorter than if you see somebody after your concussion more than 7 days after you've sustained it.
Mhm.
Because that initial week, that's really our prime time for healing. And you want to have all the information at your disposal to ensure that you are healing in the most effective and efficient way possible.
That makes sense, and it's interesting to hear how everything has changed so much, like the cocooning and all of this stuff, because I don't think all of this information is out there for the general public to hear. And it has just still such a bad stigma around it of people are like, go into a dark room immediately. like,
Yeah. And
and stay
unfortunately,
there.
I still see patients that got that cocooning advice at urgent care. So it's
Yeah.
not just the general public is unaware. I think sometimes, it's unreasonable to expect our urgent care and our primary care physicians to know everything about everything, right? But unfortunately, because this information has changed so rapidly, because we are doing so much more research now, which is great, it's not necessarily realistic or
Mhm.
front of mind for all of our urgent care and primary care providers to be up to date on all of the concussion protocols. And so I'm still seeing people get that bad advice at urgent care, which is, crushing
Yeah.
because people trust medical providers. And I think that's going back to what you're saying. It's like, maybe you should ask your provider, how much experience do you have in concussion? Why are you in it? Like, what's your take on all of it? And then decide, is this the person that I should really be taking my concussion advice from?
Talking with you really put that in my brain where I just was like, yeah, like, why aren't we? Like, we should be curious about who we're in the hands of and who we're trusting of, but we definitely are just way too trusting in the people that we show up to. Cause you're like, I need hope. I need help. If this person can remotely give me a quarter of that, then I'm going to dive in here. And I mean, I have so many questions right here, but I think we're going to just be bouncing around because
Sure.
right now we're already leading towards you and I spoke about having a pit crew of medical
Mm,
professionals, and I always go back to find your pit crew. Nobody should go through a head injury alone. Find your pit crew, find who can help you. And I guess why is it important for somebody to find their pit crew of medical professionals to help them versus putting their trust in one doctor?
right. It's the medical system is difficult. And I feel like that's a topic for a whole nother podcast. But
Yeah.
I think it's important to acknowledge that our current healthcare system really doesn't lend itself to like interdisciplinary care. It doesn't lend itself to like true communication between providers or even like a real map of how should you navigate this, right? So you just kind of pick the person that you already know that you can get into that maybe has experience, but maybe they cancel and then you see somebody else. Like it's hard. And on top of that, the thing that allows you to critically think through this and get the care that you want is the thing that's injured. So you're like, I
Yeah.
need care for my brain, but to figure out who I should see and how I should do it is confusing because my brain is injured, right?
Yeah.
And so that's even more reason why having a handful of providers that you like that has deeper education and skill in treating it, but also is genuinely invested in you and your goals, right? Everybody's concussion is different. Everybody's life is different. Everybody's goals are different. And that's how we should move through concussion treatment. So I think traditionally, when I first started as a PT 16 years ago, the assumption was the primary care provider is your gatekeeper to see all these different people. But if your primary care provider doesn't have a deeper knowledge of concussion, they're going to have a really hard time referring you to different providers at the right time. So, like, my general list of people will include your primary care because they know you, a neurologist, maybe a speech therapist, cognitive therapist, mental health therapist, neurooptometrist, vision therapist, occupational therapist, massage, acupuncture. So the list can get really long. And in a perfect world, sure, you see all of those people maybe once, maybe even twice a week. But that is nearly impossible for
Yeah.
most people for a lot of different reasons. So having a gatekeeper that knows what you need when you need it in the highest priority is going to help you recover in like a higher priority goal perspective, but also not burn you out from too many appointments, too much driving,
Yeah.
just feeling like I don't even know what I'm doing. So what I've found in my practice is that I end up usually being the gatekeeper because one, I have found the connections of people that I like and that I trust that know concussion and are great humans on top of it. But also I spend a lot of time with patients. I'm going to spend more time with patients than a neurologist or a primary care and really figure out what do we need to do? Who do you need to see? In what's realistic in your life and your schedule and your energy? And what are we prioritizing?
Yeah, it goes back to time, money, and energy. When your brain is impaired, the last thing you have is a plethora of time, money, and energy, and you just are on the hamster wheel sprinting, trying to find anybody to throw you a bone. You're like, please, just please, like somebody, somebody. And I went down that rabbit hole for about 4 years until I finally found the help that I needed. And it crushed me. Every single day I was in tears and I was exhausted, and it all came down to the stress of time, money, and energy. And what I learned is you have to be an advocate for yourself. Like big time is advocating for yourself and knowing, but it's hard when you're healing. Do you have any insight on how somebody can advocate for themselves and why it's important?
Man, I am a big proponent of advocating for yourself because nobody's going to take better care of yourself than you. That being said, it is really hard to advocate for yourself when you don't know what you're advocating for. You're like, I'm hurt, I need help, but I don't know what type of help I really need. And I don't know if you're the right person. And it can get really confusing really quickly. I work for myself in private practice, partly because I can structure my day however I want. And one of the main reasons I did that is because sometimes patients need a little extra help. Like I have gone to appointments with patients with that, or I'm doing traditional physical therapy. I'll say, okay, you're going to the neurologist tomorrow. We're going to write down a list of questions that are most important to you, and you can just hand it to them. Right. So it's not always just saying like, help me, help me, help me. I'm advocating for myself. It's using your team of people to help you strategize how to advocate for yourself, and especially having an insider view of how the medical system works. I'm like, okay, that's maybe not the strategy is just to like show up in the office and say like, I need help. It's like, okay, how can we kind of maybe bypass a little bit? And honestly, sometimes it's because I send a text to the provider and say, I need to get this patient in. And that's what helps get people in. And so that's coming back to your point of like, who's your team?
Yeah.
How are they supporting you? And who's, on your team that's really going to fight for you? Because it's going to be really hard to advocate for yourself when you don't know how to do it.
Yeah, or fully understand what's going on. And that's why it's like education is huge for concussions to just be like, okay, I did have a concussion. Let me accept that. Let me walk through this now and let me ask for help. Asking for help is one of the hardest things in just life in general, let alone once you hit your head.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just thinking for the listener who maybe has experienced their first concussion, could you maybe walk us through like what are some good questions to ask your doctor, your primary care?
Yep. So I think before you even start asking questions to your primary care, the question is like, what are your symptoms, right? Like concussion can present in a lot of different ways. Like, so some basic categories are like, is it more headache or is it more cognitive, like brain fog and memory and things like that? Is it more your sleep cycles have gone really wacky? Is it that maybe you're craving a lot of sugar and you never crave sugar? Like those types of things are really helpful information to bring to your provider to then say, I am struggling with this. What can we do to help it? Right. And usually the primary care is going to ask you a few more questions of, well, how long has this been going on? What else do you feel? But really, unless you have a very significant brain injury. So we're getting kind of out of the concussion, mild TBI world and
Yeah.
into like the only way that you're going to see anything on a scan is if there is like a brain bleed. right? So
Mhm.
that's a different category. But my point is that there's no really great way to diagnose a concussion. So you need your primary care to understand that it's a concussion, and then likely they need to refer you to somebody who has concussion experience. So the main question is, I have a concussion. Who are you going to refer me to? They likely will not have the experience.
For sure. And understanding that as well. Like, I think knowing, like, I love bringing people like you on this podcast because it's like doctors like you exist. And
Mhm.
there are specialists out there. And that is something that I don't think many people know. Like, they have
Right.
no idea that there are concussion specialists that are simply here to help with this. So it's just like really spreading awareness and understanding that, like, no, start with this one, ask for help from a specialist. They're out there for everything. Like, there's a specialist
Exactly.
for everything out there, but I don't think the brain is something that you think of. You just think neurologist immediately.
Right. And it can take months to get into a neurologist. And so then you go to the neurologist and you're like, maybe I'm fine, maybe I'm not fine. But the role of the neurologist is really to make sure that nothing's going to kill you, that you don't have a brain bleed, that there isn't an underlying tumor. Maybe their role is some medication, but they're not necessarily going to be the ideal person to help you through the functional progress. How do I go back to work? How do I get back to exercise? How do I strengthen again? My vision is a little blurry, but the eye doctor said I'm fine. How do I improve that? Like that's where the team of people come into play. And so if your primary care does have some concussion experience and you say, "Hey, I have this blurry vision, but my eye doctor said I'm fine," then your primary care should refer you to a neuro-optometrist vision therapy.
Yeah, there's wings for everything. And it is true. Neurologists are there to just save your life, but then it's like the fine tuning. Like we're just literally like the pit crew and we're a race car and we need
Mm,
some oil. We need some things to get the engine going again at
exactly.
at a speed that we were once at. And you said that it could take a while to get into a doctor. And sometimes even specialists, right? Sometimes people are just packed and it could take longer than you would like to hear. And if somebody is experiencing that, do you have an easy cheat sheet that somebody could follow to just help aid aid the injury until they get to the help that they need? Like maybe like tangible do's or don'ts.
Yeah. So, I mean, we briefly touched on a couple of them, right? Like, do not cocoon, right? But rest if you need to,
Mhm.
right? After the first couple of days, you want your brain to have sensory exposure, right? It's a little bit of a use it or lose it type of thing. So, go for a walk, do some things, but rest if you need to. So, my do's and don'ts are a little vague because everybody's different, but it's kind of
Yeah.
like do some stuff. How do you feel? You feel good? Do some more stuff. Did some stuff. You feel like crap. Stop doing that stuff. Take a break. Revisit it. Right? And in a perfect world, right, that 80%, I mean, in a perfect world, 100% of people would recover within a week from a concussion. But really, we're seeing about 80% of people recover in that 7 to 14 days because our brain is very resilient, right? We give it a little rest, just like any other injury, right? And then you're slowly exposing your brain to everyday life. Your brain's like, okay, yeah, I was a little injured, but now I'm okay. And then if we get into that 2 week, 3 week, 4 week period, and it's like, oh, sleep is really bad, or I still have this bad headache, or my neck really hurts, it's like, okay, then we definitely need more targeted, specific care for that thing that is bothering you.
I like how you say we need sensory, like start moving, but the difference of just knowing to check in with yourself and be honest with yourself. If your head
Right.
hurts after a 30-minute walk, then maybe go sit down for a
Right.
little.
Right. This is
Ye I
not a push, push, push type of thing.
I think that's the hardest thing for people because we can't see it. If you hurt your leg or your arm and you would be like, "My arm hurts because it's broken and I can see it's broken." So you're way more to ease up on that, but your brain, you're just like, "I can't tell
Right.
what's happening."
Right. And I think the other component, the thing I talk a lot with people about is there are some basic things that we all know that we can do to be healthier humans.
Yeah.
And when we get caught up in everyday life, sometimes those things get ignored or forgotten. But post concussion, that is the time to be as diligent as possible of like sleep quality, stress management, eating really healthy, like basic stuff like fruits and vegetables, proteins. I do encourage people to eat a little more carbs post concussion. I'm like, if you're craving carbs, it's because your body, your brain needs those
Wow.
easy energy fuel sources. If we're getting a little bit more specific from a supplement perspective, magnesium and omega 3s are shown to be really helpful post concussion. But really, we want to create this foundation of let's make it as easy as possible for your body and brain to heal with those tools, right? If you're not sleeping well, if you're super stressed, if you're not eating well, it is going to be harder for your body to heal. And that's
Yeah.
just like basic human be kind to your body, which is easier said than done sometimes.
I'm like, for sure. No, it is. Those are the, the basic human needs. But then it's like once you have a brain injury, that elevates on another
Yeah.
level of like, okay, we really like we can't ignore these things. You can ignore them until you can't with your brain injury because it will tell you
Yeah.
when. And I mean, it's really cool. I had no idea that when you're craving carbs, it's because your brain is needing them.
Yeah. I mean, there's actually some really, really interesting studies. They're mostly done on rats because we are not going to do specific metabolic testing on human brains while people are alive. But there is a very specific, like cellular energy or cellular injury that creates a change in how your brain cells are processing energy, which is glucose, which is, carbs essentially, right? And when you're injured, your cells need more energy to allow themselves to heal. So you need more fuel to help that healing process. So, like
Yeah.
if you're craving carbs, eat the carbs. Ideally, those carbs are like nice, healthy, like bananas, apples, whole wheat, quinoa, and not like sugar.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'm like, sugar's better than nothing, right? Like
Yeah.
don't starve your brain after a concussion,
Yeah.
right? And
That's
we can
good.
kind of like get into a lot of different avenues, but it's not uncommon for me to see, higher level recreational athletes or even higher level than that, where you're like, well, I'm not working out for a week or two. So I'm not going to eat as much because I don't need to because I'm not working out. It's like, well, your brain needs it though.
Yeah, I like how you put that. It's so true. It's a muscle. It needs fuel in order to
Mhm.
heal and to function. And I think as a society, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but what I have seen is just we really overlook the power that the brain has. I'm like, it can, energetically light up a light bulb.
Right. Right.
I don't think we really understand how powerful it is and that it does need all of this fuel just to keep moving.
Absolutely. And I mean, on top of that, it's like there's so much we know about the brain and it's fascinating, right? It's fascinating from a regular function perspective. It's fascinating from concussion and concussion healing, and then, other disease processes. But as a whole, it is resilient, but also there is just so much we don't know about it that is a little unsettling at times, right? Because I'm like, I don't know how long it's going to take you to recover. I don't know what's going to happen to this symptom. But I've had people that have been years out of a concussion, and they're like, "Man, is it too late? And am I past this healing?" And I'm like, well, if we're being honest, at 5 years post concussion, we've missed our most ideal healing time. But the reality is our brain is always adaptable. Like maybe it's not healing per se, but it is definitely capable of adapting and doing more and doing better and changing in a positive way. We just have to encourage it to.
Yeah, give it the resources and the tools. The next question, it's one of my favorite things to ask medical professionals is, can the brain heal?
Absolutely. Right? And you know, there are some things like I have a gal right now who had a pretty major stroke. And so realistically, part of her brain that was damaged in the stroke, that there are parts that are not going to heal. Like that tissue, we know based on the scans, is not recovering and is likely not going to recover 1.5 years post.
Wow.
That being said, she is still making progress. And that's because even if that specific area doesn't heal, there's so much brain around it. And if we are creating neuron connections, cellular connections to do the things that we want them to do, then really there's potential for forever healing slash forever progress.
Yeah, like, it's just you adapt new pathways,
Yep.
new, walking zones, and it's like, I think it's really cool because, yeah, anyone listening, the brain can heal, and it's like, I think people start to be like, "Well, it's been too long, like, I don't know if I
Mhm.
can," and even for me, it's been 8 years since my surgery, and I've been like, "Wow, my memory's kinda trash, like, maybe I should just go do a little tune-up on this thing." I think it's like, it is a muscle that can forever grow and adapt, and that's something that if you are listening, just know that because it's our biggest asset in who we are. So it's like fine
Right,
tune that thing.
right, right. It really is endless the amount of progress that you can have. Also, it's not uncommon to get to the point in recovery where you're like, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted of doing PT every day, cognitive exercises every day, vision therapy every day. And I'll tell people, hey, that's okay. Take a break, take a couple weeks, take a few months. When you're ready, come back. Right.
Yeah.
Because there is a huge emotional component to this, right? This life that you might have lost, these things that you don't feel like you can do anymore.
Yeah.
And you're constantly working, but you're also maybe grieving a little bit too. And so, yes, the possibilities are endless, but let's not discount the amount of work it really takes to achieve true functional change. And that doesn't have to be linear, right? It
Yeah.
can take breaks and you're not losing out because you're regrouping, you're finding joy again, you're maybe going on a vacation. Come back, regroup, see where you're at.
Yeah, and that's just real. I think that's just the cycle of life, like, it's going to happen, and recovering from a brain injury, yeah, you're grieving, you're also feel so out of control that you feel the need to put in all of this work too. Feel like you're back in the driver's seat, but it's really nice to hear that it's like, yeah, like, take your time, like, don't stress out, eat the donut, go on vacation, yeah, like,
Right.
go live your life because there is an emotional side of it that really can suffocate you if you
Yeah.
let that take control.
Yeah. I think suffocation it's a big word that constitutes a lot of emotions, but I think it's real, right? Like it's, and we're kind of getting into this next category of like there's concussion,
Yep.
but now we're kind of talking about like the post-concussion syndrome, these elongated symptoms that can last for months or even years for some people. Like that's where we're getting into this. Oh, it can be so exhausting to continue to put so much pressure on yourself to do the things to create progress and
Mhm.
feel like you're not wasting time or doing the wrong thing. And
Yeah.
that's where the mental health component of it comes in. There's two sides of that. It's this you've sustained an injury that potentially has life changing effects on your day to day life. There is also this component, just like on the cellular level, I was saying how your brain processes energy and glucose changes post concussion. There is some evidence in the research that says sometimes concussion will kind of bring out a subclinical, maybe it was pre-existing mental health diagnosis.
Got it.
Depression is the most common. As a physical therapist, not a mental health counselor, that conversation can be a little hard because there's a lot of stigma around mental health. There's a lot of, like, are you, my patients are usually joking about this, but I think it's a little serious when they're like, are you calling me crazy? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I am not calling you crazy. I'm just seeing some things that I think would be helpful to work through on an emotional level. And then the other kind of half joke is, are you saying it's all in my head? And I'm like, well, the brain is in your head. So technically it is in your head, but I'm not saying you're making it up. but
For
how
sure.
our brain works is complicated, and how we emotionally deal with the effects of the concussion, but also what's happening on the cellular level can bring out some mental health symptoms that, if we don't acknowledge and deal with them, can just interfere with kind of our joy and happiness, but also our progress.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, yeah, are you calling me crazy? I feel people are like, it's hard to distinguish which voice is talking. Is this me before the brain injury or is this the brain injury?
Mhm.
And that's the hardest thing to understand in yourself when you hit your head. And I feel like even right after as well, people are just like, what is this other voice in here?
Mhm.
Who is this person? And especially for the mental health aspect, I feel like depression and anxiety is so high after a head injury. And do you have any tips and tricks for anyone who is starting to go down that path? And I know that's a loaded question because, like you
Yeah.
said, every brain injury is different, but just any go tos for someone listening.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first one is acknowledging, like acknowledging that a concussion can be a big thing, right? It can change your life drastically, right? And if one of your friends said, I'm going through a divorce, or my mom just died, or my partner got diagnosed with a terminal illness, nobody would question them saying, I think I need to talk to somebody about this. I'm having a lot of feelings about this. Concussion can change your life in a very similar way, right? Where you maybe can't work anymore. You can't do the activity that gave you joy and purpose. Maybe it's changing your relationship with your partner because you don't feel like they understand, because they don't know what a concussion is. Like that, in a very practical way, like you're going through a life change, talking to somebody is, I think, one of the most obvious things to kind of work through that.
Yeah.
That feels like too much. Ideally, you have somebody in your life that knows you well and you can trust. To maybe they don't understand, but they're not approaching it with judgment, right? They're approaching it with love and kindness. Maybe you have that one medical provider that isn't a mental health therapist, but you're like, man, I feel like you're on my team and I can trust you. And you're just like, feeling this way. Is this normal? Is this not? And just and I think you got to get it out
Mm.
in a way that you feel safe and comfortable with, and kind of see where that goes. Maybe it's just saying it out loud. Maybe it's just
Yeah.
acknowledging it and not keeping it in. Or maybe the reflection is, ooh, this is a little deeper. This is affecting me on a deeper way than I thought. And yes, maybe I need help. So in an ideal scenario, mental health counselor with concussion experience, hard to find.
Oh my gosh.
I think it's BetterHelp, the online therapy service, counselors. I think that has drastically reduced the barrier to entry, to say you get to fill out this online survey to say what you need help with. Do you want a man? Do you want a woman? And you to have some talk therapy online, easy, like easy
Yeah.
in terms of you're not driving somewhere, you're not waiting for an appointment. And
Yep.
if you like them, great. And if you don't like them, you find somebody else. You fill out the survey and say, I want somebody else.
Yeah.
So I've recommended that a lot, because it's maybe not the most specific to concussion, but I found that it has really helped people. And if we kind of meet people where they're at in
Yep.
terms of, I don't really want to see a mental health counselor, but if it means logging onto my phone and talking to somebody for 20 minutes, that's feels a lot more achievable.
Yeah, like way more accessible and not as daunting of trying to figure it out. And again, it's finding somebody even on BetterHelp is like adding them to your pit crew. It's all about just keep adding these people, and it's going to take time and effort. But I think once you find the right people in your corner, you're just like, okay, I can do this.
Right. Like, and
I've
on the
got it.
days that you don't feel like you can do it, you have this external network of support
Mhm.
to say, okay, you're having a bad day, but yesterday was a good day. And overall, we're in a better spot, and kind of have
Yeah.
that ability to have other people help you reflect on the progress and the journey and the goals.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like leaning on them as well because it's just you're not again, you don't know which voice is you don't know what's happening, so it's just like, yeah, having these people, these in your corner and leaning on them because they can see how you are presenting yourself, changing, like acting versus
Mhm.
there was times where I just didn't even know I was acting out and my friends were like, "Are you good? What is happening?" And I would be like, "Oh my gosh, I do feel insane. What is
Right,
happening?" Didn't know because you're so in your head about it that it's just like, yeah, like once you say something of like, "Am I being crazy?" Like, and I don't love using that term, but it's just like,
sure,
am I acting differently? And they can just be like, "Yeah, you
right.
are you okay?"
And you're like, "Maybe I just need a nap. Maybe I need
Yes.
a snack." Right? Sometimes that's all it is, but
Yeah.
I think it's important to have people that can help you reflect, right?
Yeah.
If one of your friends is just like, "Hey, you are being really weird today."
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard not to take that defensively, but if you're like, "Hey, this is somebody I love and I trust. They're saying this with love and kindness." So maybe it's more of like, "Hey, are you okay today?" More of
Yeah.
like than
Yeah.
like, "What are you doing?" But we're all human, right?
Yeah. We're all just a bunch of toddlers, we're all just children that are just growing and I think once you hit your head, you also just start feeling more in that
Mhm.
mindset because so many things are happening. And the last time we spoke, I couldn't stop thinking about it. You said something about children's brains taking longer to heal from a
Yeah,
concussion over adult brains. And I've been
yeah.
so excited to get to this point because I was Googling it because I was so
Mhm.
interested. So can you take us down? Maybe people
Yep.
listening have children and it's just like they want to care for them at the best that they can and understand why do kids' brains take longer than adults' brains to heal?
And at first glance, you're like, well, that's not true. Children heal faster, which in a lot of ways, children do heal faster, right? They just have their bodies are already going through this growing phase. So they have all the foundations and the building blocks to just heal a broken bone faster. So similar with the brain, their brain is still developing, right? The brain is not fully formed until I think there's a big debate on this. In my opinion, probably not till we're 25, but
Yeah.
maybe if we're talking specifically about concussion, maybe that 18, 20, maybe even 22-year-old range, right? Our brains are still developing. And so as our brains are developing, they're trying to develop new neural connections, right? So your brain is already, as an adolescence, your brain is already trying to figure it out, right? There's a lot of energy that's going into like, oh, is this right? Is this right? Is this the right connection? Is this how it functions? Developing coordination, making all those brain neural connections. So with a concussion, that's an injury that breaks those neural connections. And so you don't really have the benefit of like 20 years of memory in your brain of how those neural connections exist, right? It's a total free for all in an adolescent's brain. And so it takes that much longer to reform those connections
Wow.
and kind of get going forward. So I've mentioned this stat already a couple times that the 80% of adults, 7 to 14 days to recover. For children, our standard is really 4 weeks to recover.
Whoa.
Yeah. And that just like as adults that we've talked about with post concussion syndrome, children can also go into this post concussion syndrome state where we're seeing these symptoms that are affecting their day to day life last for a couple months, a year, maybe 2 years.
Wow.
So I think the most important part of this is understanding that kids playing middle school and high school, soccer and football and field hockey and lacrosse. If they have sustained a concussion, one of the best things that you can do for the healing and the future of their brains is to not let them play again for 4 weeks, which
Oof.
is kind of absurd to say out loud in the society that we're living in. But if at a cellular level, kind of going back to these rat studies that we see these cellular changes, if we know that you can be symptom free, but the cells are still not behaving normally until 4 weeks in a child post concussion, would you let your kid go back? If you
Wow.
knew, if you had, x-ray vision and you're like, I know you say you're fine, but I can tell that you're not fine. You're
Wow.
not healed. Do you let them go back? I don't have children, but if I did, I would not let them go back.
Yeah, that'll
That's
really
not
make
how
you
our
think.
world works right now.
I feel like people just push it. Like, because again, yeah, if we had X-ray vision, that would honestly help all of us because then we could see it and we could understand, but unfortunately we don't. And maybe in the future they'll figure that out. But
Mm,
yeah, it's just like you see even football players, like, then
yeah.
it's all learned from, the adults of how the
Mhm.
world is going. It's like a child who is, wanting a bigger future for himself,
Right.
like, or
Right? And
herself, like they're not
is it
going
worth
to.
it? I don't
Wow.
know. I mean, that's not for me to decide, but, football, I have to admit, I am a big Ohio State football fan. That's my alma mater. As I've gotten deeper into understanding concussion and treating concussion, my love for college football is way down. Like, I think I watched
Wow.
maybe one game last year because, I mean, these are children, right? They're 18, they're 19, they're 20, right? In my mind, they don't have full frontal lobe development to understand true consequences. And I don't necessarily trust the athletic staff and the coaching to have their best brain health front of mind because there's a lot of money, there's a lot of ego, and there's a lot at stake. But have you ever wondered why the NFL concussion protocol is 7 days? It's because
Wow.
they play on a 7 day schedule. But I just said multiple times that we're looking at 7 to 14 days to recover. So really the safe thing would be a 2 week protocol, but
Yeah,
that doesn't align with the money and the star power and all of that expectation that goes
yeah,
into it. But
wow,
one football player that has been front and center in the news in the last couple of years is the Miami Dolphins quarterback,
yeah,
Tua. And I mean, we've seen it play out on camera. Like, it's insane to me that he is still playing.
yeah.
I don't understand it. I think he is literally putting his life in danger.
Yeah, and I think that's the hard part, when you're so in the sport and this is like your sole mission of what I'm here to do right now and in the present moment this is what I want to do. I don't think a lot of people are thinking longevity and
Mhm.
what this is going to look like post-career, and I think we just see it every day. But I
Right?
I I couldn't even imagine your life's purpose is to heal people from this injury and then yeah, you're watching football and you're like, "Oh my goodness, this goes against everything that I believe in every single day."
Yes. Yeah.
Like,
It's tough.
yeah. Yeah, it's hard. It's a fine line for sure. And it's again, I think it just goes back to asking the questions, knowing the people who are you're in the hands of. But yeah, the learning, I feel like from the world and society is just it's wild. And I think one day after hopefully they've researched the brain enough, people can or we have X-ray vision, maybe people can start to understand how this is affecting them. But when you brought that up about adolescent brains taking longer to heal, I'm like, "Whoa." Like,
Right.
children are the light of parents' worlds, and it's like if they knew exactly what was going on underneath the hood of
Mhm.
the skull, maybe
Right.
they would make different decisions or supplement or do other things if they knew they could do that.
Right. Right. And it's a matter of being aware of
Yeah.
saying, huh, you hit your head. Maybe you have a concussion, right? Making that decision, is it a concussion? Is it not a concussion? And then if the answer is yes, it is a concussion, now what does that look like in terms of activity? Should they go play football tomorrow? Even if it's flag football, there's a lot of contact, right?
Yeah.
Should you, I mean, there's a lot to be said of not instilling fear and yada, yada, yada. But, educating yourself as a parent, educating your child of just saying, like, hey, we're going to take it a little easy. That bump on your head was kind of, we just got to let it heal type of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, and it's going all the way back to what we started with is just like not waiting too long to go in to get help. Like the faster you want to get back to doing activity or the sport that you love, like take it seriously and go get help sooner rather than later instead of being
Right.
like, "No, I'm fine."
Right. And, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to go in, you're going to get a full evaluation, and somebody's going to say, you're fine,
Mhm.
right? Which is valuable information. But in the
Yeah.
chance that they're saying, hey, this is a concussion, here is the list of things that you're going to do for the next 2 weeks to ensure that your brain has the best chance of healing ASAP, then you are a million steps ahead of the game of just this wait and see model.
Yeah, everyone's just scared of the answer for sure. I didn't get checked out because I was just like, "I don't wanna know what they're gonna say." And
Mhm.
it's just like, yeah, you let that go long enough or you don't take it seriously and things, shit can hit the fan.
Right,
Like,
right. You are
yeah,
living proof of that.
and we never wanna, like you said, instill fear, but it's just like knowing the consequences,
Mhm,
knowing what could be, factoring in a risk scale of how far are you willing to slide this is,
mhm.
we always like talk about like a stoplight, like every day it's just like, okay, are you red? Are you yellow? Are you green? What are we feeling like here? But yeah, and it's like this whole conversation has just gotten me all juiced up. I love just hearing you talk about this stuff, and I definitely want to make sure we hit on like where can people learn more about like you and your resources because you have so many incredible resources on your website. Even I saw like
Mhm.
a yoga for dizziness ebook,
Yeah,
and you want to just like talk about what you have going on that people can
sure.
lean on you for.
Sure. So, my basic who I am is I'm a physical therapist. But like I already alluded to, that has kind of extrapolated out into a lot of different ways. And so my website has most of my information. It's physioyogaandwellness.com. So I am based in Denver, Colorado. So anybody that's in Denver can come see me in person. I do classes at the Denver Athletic Club. Some of my patients, I see them in Cheeseman Park, which is a local park here. So
Okay.
lots of options if you're in Denver. If you don't happen to be in Denver, like Kelsey already mentioned, I am teamed up with these two other vestibular and concussion trained therapists that are out of the Pacific Northwest. And we have this program called Balance Works. And right now we're running these little 4-week mini classes that are designed to help people move through their dizziness, whatever their dizziness is caused by concussions, strokes, Meniere's, but having the confidence and the guidance to say, yes, you don't necessarily feel great, but you can move and you can feel better.
Mhm.
So we have that program. My program specifically, this yoga for dizziness, is geared more towards using yoga to either feel better. So like grounding, breathing, finding stillness and stability to help your symptoms feel better, or using yoga for habituation, which means kind of exposure to multiple movements over and over and over again to get your brain and body used to it. So we do that more like traditional vinyasa flow type things. So those are both programs I have on my website, but I put a smattering of those videos for free on YouTube as well.
Awesome.
So I have
Awesome.
YouTube so people can do that. Then I have that ebook. So maybe people don't like watching things. You can read through the ebook, understand it. That's on my website. And then I have blogs, which sometimes have really important research information. And a lot of times it's just, I went surfing in Mexico and I encouraged my friend to take a wave and the surfboard hit her in the face and we ended up in urgent care. So it's a little bit about just the adventures of my life as well.
Cool. Cool. No, I love that. And yeah, we'll make sure to link your website, your YouTube. We'll put all of that
Awesome.
in the show notes of this because yeah, when I was looking through, it's like every time I bring a guest on here and I dig through their website, I'm just like, this is so amazing. We are so lucky to have people like you in this world who care about so many things and just, wanting to help people live their best life and be healthy in that and feel good. And yeah, like I commend you for everything that you've done because it was really cool to learn myself and just dig through all of that. I'm like, all right, these people exist and we want to showcase them to the world. So, yeah, thank you for everything that you've done.
Oh, well, I'm glad you found me. I think kind of coming back to one of your questions of like, what do people do?
Yeah.
Well, it's in theory, doing a Google search should be helpful, but it's hard to know who to trust
Yeah.
and is it convenient and does it make sense and are you going to connect with that person?
Mhm.
But, I'm just a single person trying to put out as much information into the world as possible to be as helpful as possible. Hopefully that reaches more and more people.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of people like me doing this, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why I teamed up with two other therapists out of the Pacific Northwest, because we're like, let's try to, gain a little bit more momentum to get this in front of people that really need it,
For
right?
sure. For sure.
But it's hard. It is hard to reach the masses as a solo practitioner out of Denver. But I love opportunities like this because the more we talk about it, the more people it reaches and the better informed we all are.
And yeah, we're putting all of you on the resources tab on the Save a Brain website because, yeah, these are people that we get behind. I don't know, finding a provider, I always say, is just kind of like speed dating. You're just like, okay, is this going to work? Yes or no? But at least if you have a list of people, you're way more like, okay, let's just go down the list. Let's check some boxes here. I like to end the show with kind of words of hope for anybody who is maybe in the thick of their injury. Do you have any words of inspiration for them?
I love that you've used the word hope a few different times because that is that's such an important concept. If you don't have hope and you feel like crap, it's really hard to get motivated to do the things that you need to do to heal, right? And I think one of the foundations of hope is understanding where you're at, but understanding that there is a path forward, right? And that path might change, right? But that path is for you to decide and your providers to help you along your path, right? It's
Yeah.
it's your goals, it's your life, it's your brain, and there is always potential to feel better, to heal, to do more.
Yeah, I love that mic drop. It's that, it's the hope, it's the pit crew, it's leaning on the trusted people in your life, educating yourself, just understanding everything as a whole. And I think the more people do get curious, and I try to keep these relatively short because I'm like, if somebody is recovering from a head injury, the last thing you want to do is just like try to focus on something for longer than an hour.
Mhm.
But yeah, be curious about these things. I think just be inspired to continue to moving forward. I'm grateful that we got to chat for an hour. And was there anything else you wanted to touch on, or do you feel like we covered the surface
I
of?
think we covered a lot. I mean, I think both you and I could talk about this for many, many hours to come.
I
There's
know.
so much to be said, which is great, right?
Yes.
There
Yes.
there is we know a lot about concussions. We know a lot about what helps people. There is more to come in the future for sure.
Mhm.
But I think that understanding just some basic like this is a concussion. There are people out there to help you. You are likely going to heal. But if those symptoms last, there's lots of people out there to help you to get you exactly where that you want to be and need to be. So I think we covered lots of different concepts related to that. And I hope people found it valuable.
I wish these could be 4 hours long. We could really get our hands in here. But well then yeah, thank you for coming on. And I'm excited to see you next week on the panel on we're gonna do a live podcast is what it feels like. And yeah, I'll make sure to link everything in the show notes so people can find you and all of your amazing work and resources.